Hello everyone and welcome to CommunityForce webinar. As you all know, my name is Mehreen Mirza and I will be facilitating today's session. I'll also be answering your questions during the dedicated Q&A breaks. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions throughout the session. We want this to be as interactive and as helpful as possible to all of you. With me is Christine Smith, who will be our trainer for today and walk us through all the key areas under today's topic. Now, before we get started, and while others are still joining, I'd like to show you a few key features that will make this webinar more helpful to you. Now, as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a panel with an orange box. You can use that arrow to collapse or open the panel. This will give you more screen space. Also, to ask any questions, please type in the questions and click on send or enter. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions and as many questions as we can, either by typing them in or addressing them verbally during the dedicated Q&A break. Now, please understand that I will continue to answer your questions even when Christine is continuing with her presentation. So please feel free to continue asking your questions. Also, a copy of today's presentation is available as a handout in the handout section. Please click on the title and download it for your reference. This help guide contains individual help guide articles and FAQs, video guides, everything. Now, for a smooth experience, we have put everyone on mute to minimize any background noise. Let's just see how many of you have joined. Okay. Since most of you have joined, let's get started with the webinar. The topic for today is a review of specialized question types. I'll now hand over the mic to Christine. All yours, Christine. Thank you so much. Enjoy your session, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you, Maureen, so much for that fine introduction. So let's go ahead and get started with our webinar today. So of course, with today's webinar, we are going to be covering a brief overview of some of the key question types that we have out on the site. I know some of our clients, they see those, they're not quite sure how they function. So we're going to kind of go over some of them that may not be used as commonly as some of the other ones. And so, and then we'll talk about how you can use them to collect data. So of course, who's going to benefit from today's webinar? This is going to be any of you administrators who are responsible for creating questions as well as building out your application forms. And this is going to be beneficial to you because of knowing how to build these questions and knowing how to use them effectively on your application forms. And so the first half of the session, you can see we do have quite a bit we're going to cover. That's why we do have about an hour and a half set aside for this session. It may go that long, it may not go that long, but we did want to allocate that time frame so that we could cover all of these. So we're going to talk about some of these different ones. We're going to talk about the file because we do have some questions about the file types, and then the difference between the float, the numeric, and the currency, and then how to do calculations on those fields. And then we'll talk about a question type called date day validation, a date difference question type, a dependent drop down, encrypted field, the organization validation, and then payment. So if you have a payment tied to your application form, how can you collect that? And then we'll take a break. And then during that break, Maureen will answer any questions that came through regarding these specific topics. And then after the break, we'll continue and we'll talk about the application link. And then so the first half will predominantly be using the scholarship site. And then the second half will be using the grant site to do our demonstrations. But please know these are functionalities that are available on both scholarships and grants. It's just the second half of the session, the majority of these question types are ones that our grant users use, but if you're a scholarship user, it's helpful for you to stay on because some of them you use as well, but we will be using the grant site to demonstrate those. So we'll be talking about application link. What is that? Drop down with a file download. That's a special question type we have. Data table, how to create those, how to create repeaters, a URL. So what is that? It's to collect URLs in your application forms. Program name, that's used by grant users. A tuition date is something that is used by scholarship users, and then physical signature. So those will probably drop back to the scholarship site when we get to those. So, and then at the end, we'll take an additional break, and then Maureen will answer any additional questions that have occurred during those specific topics as well. So the first topic that we want to get started with is the question type file. So what is the question type file? So when you're looking at your question setup, and I will go to the site here in a minute and explain to you what that, so that you can see how that functions. But the file question types are used when you want an applicant to upload a document of some kind. So that allows them to upload the document, and then you can determine what type of file you want them to attach. So when we talk about documents, it could be a transcript form that's a PDF. It could be an image like photos. It could be a Word document. It can be Excel spreadsheets, etc. So when you create a file question type, you can determine how you want those formats to be formatted. And then when you're using file type questions, it's important to know that the size limit for those uploads, so when they upload a document, there's only an allotment of 10 megabytes per section. So if you have multiple uploads in your application form, and within that section, you may only want to do like maybe a couple at a time in a section, then create another section and have uploads in that section and so forth, so that you don't have your applicants go over this 10 megabyte size. And then that way you won't have any issues when those uploads happen. So let's go to the site here. So like I said, I'm going to start out with the scholarship site. And did it already kick me out? I just logged in there. Okay. And I'm going to go to the application form here to demo this, so you can just kind of see how it's set up. And then once, of course, I'm logged into that application form, I go to the application settings, because application settings, of course, is where all questions are built within the application form for the applicant to complete. And then for the file question type, I'm going to go into my financial information section, because I do have some file uploads there. And then within there, here we go. So you can see here, these are my question types. And here I have a question type called file. So I'm just going to click on it. That's where they upload a copy of the FAFSA. And so if I click on it, you can kind of see, this is where you can see how it's built. So you just add a question like you would normally, and then this is the screen that's going to appear. And then when you select the file type here, there's a listing of these file types. This file type file, as soon as you select your file type, it's going to give you the parameters that are needed for that specific question type. And so when you select file, it's going to ask you, what files are you going to allow this upload to be? So maybe it's a Word document, or maybe you want to allow them to upload a photo of a Word document or a PDF version, or maybe it's even an Excel. Then you can just do the Excel here and then select it. And if I hit this drop down over here, you can see the different functions, the different file types. And so all you do is you get this listing from that drop down, and then you select the ones you want, and you don't select the ones you do not want to allow them. So of course, if this was just a Word, this is just an example. Of course, a FAFSA may not be in an Excel format, so I probably wouldn't select that, but for demo purposes, I do have them all selected. And then all you do is you fill out the additional parameters according to your application form. And if you need more information, there is, how to build out the rest of the fields here. Those are pertaining to all questions. So you can go to how to build a question in our guides, and that'll help you there. So of course, then once you're done building, you do want to go ahead and hit save and exit. So as I go through the presentation today, I will go through my manage application so that you can kind of see, okay, that's how it's built, but how does it look to the applicant? So if I go to manage applications here, I'm just going to pick an applicant here so you can see how it looks to them, and then go into their dashboard. So the next screen I come to, this is when the applicant's in their application form, they're filling out their application form. This is what they're seeing. So if I go to the financial information section here and click on it, then you'll see here, there's that please upload a copy of their FAFSA. They have a browse button, and then all they need to do is click that browse button. It'll take them to their local computer to their file storage on their local computer, and then they can locate it and then hit it and save it, and then it'll locate it, it'll show it here. And then they can have a delete if they need to delete it and reload something else. But like I said, it can only be one file per question, and you can only have up to uploads of up to 10 megabytes per section. So if I had like 3 or 4 uploads and I knew they were probably going to be long documents, I may just put one in this section, create another section where it might be more appropriate to put a upload and then have them upload more documents there. But it is 10 megabytes per section. Okay, so that's the file question. The next question types we want to talk about are used for numbers within our system if you're collecting numbers. So if you have a field and you're going to collect numeric items, we have 3 different choices. We have a float, and we have individuals say, well, what's the difference? When would I use what? So a float question type is used in the same manner as a numeric, but it's for a more complex scientific equation. Especially think of a float if you have a floating decimal. So someone like with a GPA, for example, they may enter 4.0, or you might have a number, it's 40.3. So you can see it's like different locations where that decimal would fall. So like here it's 4.0, but maybe I want to put, this wouldn't be for a GPA, of course, but maybe instead of having the decimal there, it might be there. So if I'm collecting, something that's scientific, or if there's like different symbols, scientific symbols within that numeric field, then I would want to use a float. And then you can set a minimum and maximum values for your floats as well. And so that's the float. So think of a float as if, especially if you have a floating decimal, they're going to be entering it and it's not going to always be in the same place, then that would be a float. The next one, numeric. So that's exactly what it is. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's best used for arithmetic calculations. So like numeric fields that you want to be left aligned, especially if you're going to export this to Excel and you want it to be specific alignment, then you would also want to use numeric fields for that. And then you also, when using numeric fields, you can control the number range that falls between, like you can have between 0 and 100, enter a number between that. You can control that with the minimum and maximum values. So that's what's nice with the numeric field also. But that's mainly if you're just using numeric and you have a static decimal, that you want to use. Currency. Currency is exactly what it is. It's if you're collecting a monetary amount, and when you're looking results and you're looking at their application form, you want to see your currency symbol. So that currency symbol is something that's set up in the administration site settings. So if you're in a European country and you have the pound signs, or here in the US we have the dollar sign, or depending on what currency symbol you have, you can identify that in your application administration settings and for the administrations for the site settings. And then when you're looking at your reports, if you use a currency field, it's going to give you the 2 decimal point, and it's also going to give you a dollar sign so that you know that's a currency field. So that's the difference between the 3. So I'm just going to go to the site here real quick. I'm not going to show you from the applicant's perspective because it's pretty self-explanatory. I can kind of do that here. You can kind of see here, this is a currency field. If you notice, it has the dollar sign here. And so that's a currency field. Here would be a numeric field. And so you can kind of see there the difference between those. But if I go to application settings here, and over here to application settings, open it up here. Maybe. Okay, here we go. And if I go into the financial aid section here. So here you can see we have a numeric. So this was that COA number here. And with a numeric, when I choose when I choose the question type numeric, it's going to give me a minimum value and a maximum value. You don't have to put anything in these. It'll just automatically default to whatever, to infinity. Or here, you can put a maximum, or maybe I don't want them to have a value of 0. I want them to have at least a value of 1. So I can put a 1 here and make that the minimum value. So that's numeric. And then if I jump out here, I will show you the float. There is a float. Here's a float. So that's for the student aid index. And here is, again, just a minimum maximum value, just like with the numeric. You can still put a range in there. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank. And then if we go to currency, I'll find a currency question so you can see there's pretty much on the back end, not a whole lot of difference. But with currency, here I select currency, but you see there's no minimum maximum amount for the currency. So I can't put a maximum on a currency field. So that's the only difference with the currency, is you're going to get that $sign or that currency symbol that you use. And then, of course, it's going to identify it as a currency with the decimal digits as well. Okay, so that's the difference between those. So now when you have those 3 fields, we do have another question type that you can use that's called calculation. So a calculation is a question type that allows you to run arithmetic equations on specific questions, like adding fields together, adding, subtracting, dividing, times, on those 3 types of questions. So you can do it on a numeric, you can do it on a currency, and you can do it on a float. You can run calculations. What's important to note is you can't run a calculation on a numeric and a currency. Any calculation you work with, then it has to be a numeric and a numeric, a currency and a currency, and a float and a float. You can't cross over on those question types. So if you need to run calculation fields and you want to use numeric and currency, you can't. It has to just be a numeric, and then the other calculation you run has to be on a currency. You can't cross over on any of those 3 types of fields and question types. So to create calculations, very simple. Again, it's a question type that we use. If I go back to the site, I have one already built. So here I have total additional sources of funding, and I'm running a calculation on my currency questions. So I'm going to open that up so you can kind of see here. Here's my question type, and I've selected calculation. And as soon as you select calculation, here it's going to say this is the formula. And to create a formula, right under this formula field here is where you select add formula. So as soon as you click this add a formula, then it's going to open up a screen similar to this. And if you haven't created a formula yet, it's not going to have any lines, but you do just what you do. It'll have just the first line. And what it's wanting to know is where is the question located that you want to run the calculation on. So it wants to know what section is that question housed in, and then what's the field. So that's when it wants to know what's the field, it wants to know what's the name of that specific question that you're going to run this calculation on. And then over here you have your operator. So you can see if I click on this drop down, I can do a plus, subtract, times, and division here on that. And so what it's asking is, this is the field. This is the first one I want to run my calculation on. And then what do I want to do between this one and the next field that follows? And so every one that I want to do, then I just click this little button, add a field, and it'll open up another line of text for me. So here then I say, okay, I want to add this question. And then I want to add another one. So I clicked add a field, opened up a 3rd line. I want to add this question. And then I click add a field because I have 4 different questions that I want to calculate together. I want to get a compilation, a total of all 4 of these together. And then here, you notice I don't have an operator because this is it. This is where this is the end of the line. I don't want to add any more after this, so I don't have an operator. The only time you're going to get the operator is when you click the add a field. And then of course, once you have your equation created, then go ahead and hit save and exit. And then it'll be here, it'll show here the equation, that calculation that you've created here. And then of course here, if I wanted to have the currency symbol, then I go ahead and hit yes on that as well, so that it knows that when I'm doing this calculation, since I'm doing it on the currency, do I want the dollar sign to be there? And then I can say, yes, give me that dollar sign. And then it'll be visible on the calculation as well. Even though I'm adding currencies, I still, in the actual calculation, the final total, I want to see a dollar sign also. So that's what that question there is asking. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out and then just quickly go over to the manage application so you can see how that calculation looks to the applicant. So I'm going to go back in my demo applicant and then go back to that section as soon as it opens here. Financial information. Okay, so they're going through, and then what they see here is they're going to enter here. So let's say I put 300 or 3,025. Here I'm going to put 500. So that's part of my fields that I want to calculate. And then down here, it's showing 0. So the applicant has this little button that they click called calculate. They click that button, and why did it not give me my figure? Well, it was working earlier when I did this. Let's put some figures up here. Maybe it's needing. Well, I apologize. For some reason, it's not picking up my calculation, and I'm not exactly sure why it's not doing that, because as I tested it earlier, it was doing it just fine, and now for some reason it's deciding not to. But anyway, what it would do, I apologize again, it would put a figure here in that specific calculation. So let's go ahead and just return to the dashboard here. Okay. And so now, so that's how you run the calculation on specific question types. The next question type we want to talk about is the question type date day validation. So how is that question type used? So let's say you have an incident. So you want an applicant to apply, or you want the applicant to enter a date of when an incident falls within for them to be eligible. So like for this instance, maybe this is an adult learner's application, a scholarship or something, and I want them to, have an incident that happened within a certain time frame. So with the date day validation question, it is a date field. It is a date field that the applicant is entering. It's a date. And then what the system does is it goes out based on how you've built this question type and determines if it falls within the minimum and maximum number of days that you've created. So like if you enter a minimum and maximum number of days of 1 to 30, what it's saying is an applicant has 30 days to enter an application for a specific event that occurred. That's just my scenario. So I'm saying, in order to be eligible for this application, they're going in, they're applying. I want to know the incident that they're using to apply, and did it fall within this certain time frame? If it didn't, then I'll have a second question that appears that will then tell them they're not eligible because it didn't fall within that date range. So to build that out, let me go out here and go to the application settings. And under my section here, let's see, where would I have that? Let's see. Okay, so here I have my date day validation question. And so I say, please enter the date of the incident. Note the incident must be either 30 days before or at least 30 days after today's date. So it's going to look at today's date and say, is it 30 days before or 30 days after? And then when they try to enter a date within that range, it will give them an error message. So how do I build that? Well, first of all, I need to select the question type date day validation. And then here is where you put the minimum days and the maximum days. So it's going to look at the minimum day and the maximum day of today's date. And so I'm saying it has to be either 30 days before today's date or 30 days after today's date in order for them to be eligible for this specific scenario. And then I'm going to hit save and exit, and then it will be built. Of course, if it was like 1 day before and 30 days after, then it would be the 1 to 30 scenario. So depending on whatever your range is, or maybe it has to be, you know, something that's occurring 30 days before, then of course, then you would just do what, the 30 and then 0 on that. So how does it look to the applicant? So if I go out to that applicant here and view, to their financial information. And let's see, it was right after this I saw it. So here's that question. And so here I have a date, 7/15/2025. And if I come down here and hit the save, so they enter the date. And then as soon as they enter the date, it'll say invalid date range. Please select a date between 7/20 to 9/18, because of course 7/15, remember that was the 30 before and the 30 days after. So what they need to do then is come in here and then they can enter a date. Let's do 08-01-2025, tab out. And now if I hit the save, it should allow me, where is it? Yeah, there it is right there. So I don't have the error anymore. But if you notice, it didn't give it to me until after I hit the save, and then I've gotten that information there that wasn't within that range. So here I can see I've entered my date. It's now within range. So now I'm eligible to continue. And you can even have it, you know, set logic or something like that, where they get an additional message as to what they're to do if it's not eligible. Okay, so I'm going to return to dashboard. And then that's the day date validation. And then the other one we're going to talk about is a question type that's kind of may seem similar, but it's a little different. And what it is it's called the date difference question type. So what this does is it looks at, usually you have more than one question. So you have 2 different dates where you're having your applicant enter dates. And those specific question types you're going to build, I'm going to show you this here in a minute. You're going to have a date question type 1 and a date question type 2 in my scenario. So I create those 2 fields first for them to enter a start date, and then another one where they enter an end date field. Then I create a third question type called the date difference question. And what it does is I tell it the parameters. I say, look at date 1, look at date 2, and compare those 2 dates. And then if it's within the range, then they can move forward. If it's not within the range, then they will get an error message. So now within this one, I do have to create a third question for the error message, of course. So I would have with this build, if I wanted an error message to appear, I would have my date 1, my date 2, my date difference question, and then my message question in order to get the whole functionality to be how I would want it to work for my scenario. So let me go to the site here and look at the questions here. This one under application settings, we're going back to the build. And in this one, it's built in my academic information section. And so here I have my questions. So I have my beginning date. So this is saying what's their break in education. So again, this is in order to be eligible for an adult funding, you must have a minimum of at least 24 consecutive months during our adult life when you have not been enrolled in any type of higher education program. So what I'm saying is this is my section, I've got a message, and then I'm saying this is what they're going to be doing. What's the beginning date? They have to have at least 24 consecutive months of break in education to be eligible for this application. So here I have a beginning date of the break, and then I have an end date of the break. So these are just date fields. If I click on them, you can see I've just chose, it's just a regular date, nothing different. You can put a minimum, maximum dates, just like when you're using date of birth, that sort of thing. This is just a basic date field for any type of date you want to collect in the system. There's nothing special about this. This is just a date field. And then I've created my second date field question, which is this one. What's the ending date in the break? And then again, just a basic date field, like you would build any date field out in the application form. And then what makes this work though is then I have my date difference question type. And so this date difference question type is going to look at these two dates and run a comparison. And then within this question type, I've put my parameter. So here I'm going to click on it, date difference. I've created my question. I've selected the question type, date difference. As soon as I select the question type, date difference, it wants to know the formula. So it's kind of like a calculation on currency and float numbers, but it's a calculation based on date fields. So here is where I create my formula. This is where I click the add dates, and then I have to pick the date fields I want to run my formula, my calculation on. So I have, okay, the first one is in the academic information. So you can see this is just like building a calculation field, but it's on date. So it's called date difference. And so here we have the field name. That's that first date that I want. And then this is the second date. I'm going to choose my operator. I want it to subtract them. And then this is my second date. Again, each time I want to add a field, I click add a field, and then it can run the compilation, the calculation. And then I hit save to save that. And then here will be where it returns the results. And then I can hit save and exit when I'm done creating that. And then you'll notice I also created, because if it doesn't fall within those two dates, they don't get an error message like they did with that date validation. I have to create that for them. So here I've created a message. I've created the message on logic. So you can see the logic here in a minute, but you can see it's a message that's going to appear if they didn't meet the parameters of this. So what I'm saying here is, on the date difference, if it's greater than, so when they run the calculation, if it's greater than 23, then I want this message to appear. Because I'm saying it has to be 24 months. And so if it's greater than 23, then it doesn't appear. So let's exit without save. And then if it falls, what's the system's going to do, it's going to look at the results when they click the calculation on that. It's going to look at it, And if it doesn't fall within the calculation parameter, then it's going to give them this error message saying it must be within 24 months. It can't be 23. It has to be within the 24. Okay, so now let's go look at it from the applicant's perspective. And academic information. And there's my two dates, beginning date of the break, the ending date of the break. Total months of break, date difference. So if I come here and I put, let's see, let's do 12-01-2024, and I hit the date difference, it's going to look at it. And it's going to say, oh, that's only a month. And then notice here, you must be within the 24 months, so you're not eligible. That's that message that is appearing. So then, of course, if I put, let's see if I can get this right in my head here. Let's do at least 24. So let's do 01-01-2023. Hit the date difference. And now there's the total months in break, 24. And oops, and then as you can see, it's now showing them the message is no longer there. So it's looking at this date field, and then running the parameters based on the calculation that you built when you built the date difference question. Okay, so that is date difference. The next one we have is called dependent dropdown. So the dependent dropdown question is a question you build that is dependent on another question that the applicant is answering. So a nice illustration with this would be, let's say you want to give your applicants a listing of cities by state. So they answer the state question, and then the city question that you build is going to be a dependent drop-down question. And then what you do when we build this, and I will show you this, if the applicants say they select the state of Virginia, then the next question, that is the city question that they need to answer, will automatically give them a listing of all the cities within Virginia. Maybe they want to choose the state of Florida when they choose their state question. So then as soon as they get to the city question, the system will automatically give them just the cities of Florida. So that's a nice use of the dependent dropdown. So how's that built? Well, let's go back to the site, application settings. Under my personal information section here, I have, where is my state? Okay, I have a state question. So the state question I just built as a regular drop-down. It was a drop-down listing, and then I have my city question. And so when I built my city question, so the state question, just a basic drop-down question, like we build the state normally. I created my values with all my states. Then the dependent drop-down question is another question that gets built. And what we're telling it is that when the applicant, this question, when I built it, is dependent on how the applicant answered this question. So I'm going to go to the city, which is my dependent dropdown. And what you need to do is, of course, this is just with the applicant. We're just telling them pick what city do you live in? Because they picked the state of Virginia or Florida, then they're going to get a listing just for Virginia or Florida, depending on what state they answered. So here is my question type, dependent dropdown. And you're seeing, okay, nothing's different. It looks like a basic dropdown question. But where the difference falls with the dependent dropdown is here in the value field. So if you notice when I clicked on the value field for the state, it just had the label and the thing, and then you just added all your states. Well, with this one, when I click the add value, it's going to be a little different. it's going to say, what is this question dependent on? What question is it dependent on? So I need to say, well, what section? It's the personal information. What's the question? That's the dependent question. It's the state. So I'm telling the system it's in personal information. The question that is my dependent question is state. So when the applicant answers state, I'm going to give them a listing that they need to choose from. So this is where I do that. So this is the option. What's the option? So this is where I need to select. So notice this listing here. What the system's doing is it's looking at that state question that was built, and it's saying, okay, what were all the allowed answers in the state question? There's all of my states. So for each one of these states that I want to enter a city for, I need to do this. I need to select. So if I go here, say I select Florida. Okay, so what would happen, I would have a blank screen. So if I select, let's see, Alabama, I have a blank screen. I enter all my cities. Then I hit save. Then I go to the next state, like Florida, and here's my listing. And this is how you want to put your listing. You always start your listing with select. Now you're going to notice with this setting, I don't have a label and a value like I do when I'm entering my drop downs for other fields. I have to actually tell the system what's what. So if you'll notice here, I have select, and then you see that little squiggle in the middle there, that's called a tilde. There's no space, and then select. You always want to start your listing off with select, because if you don't, it's going to automatically default to whatever the first item is in the list. You want it to have select so that the system knows they haven't selected it, it's in the coding, and that they need to select something from the listing. So as the applicant in the state selects Florida, then I'm telling them show this list. So all you need to do is just come here and start entering your cities here. Come down, hit enter. And then you'll notice I don't have a tilde yet because that's the whole value and label. Okay, and then you just hit enter, and then you do your next city, and then your next city, and then your next city. You enter all of those in, and then you hit save. Now you're going to notice something. Don't do save and exit. Hit save because I have a lot to enter. So I'm going to hit save, and it's not going to change the screen, but I've hit save, and now I can go, and now I can go to my next city, my next state, I mean. So let's say I want to do the same for Virginia. When they get Virginia, I want to give them a listing. There we are again, select. Then I enter my new ones, I hit save. So you want to hit save after every single one so that you save the data. New Jersey, I haven't done yet, and then you want to do that for every single one of your states so that they can enter, they can make a selection for that specific field. So that is the dependent drop-down question type. And then of course, when the applicant's filling out the application, completing it, when we get there, okay. So here, okay, ignore this one. This is a different one. This is the two that we're working with. So here's my Florida. So say they choose Florida. And so now when I come here to city, there's that word select because it's looking at that listing that I created. And now it's only giving me that listing that I put in there. Okay, and then I can select that and then go on forward through. Okay, so that's how the applicant completes that. The next field we want to talk about is an encrypted field. So an encrypted field is a question that you create that you don't want it to be viewable to anyone within your organization other than the global administrator. So it's an encrypted field that's sensitive. So like maybe a social security number. The global admin needs to see that, but you don't want everybody else having access to that. So you create that field as an encrypted field. Now, one thing that's important to note that the data is protected and encrypted when it's at rest. So that means as long as it's on our site, in our CommunityForce site, on the site online here, then it's encrypted. If you take and put this field in an ad hoc report, or you take a report and export it to Excel, it's no longer on our site and it will no longer be encrypted. It will be visible to anyone who has access to that report. So that's important to note. Anytime you take and put an encrypted field in a report and export it to Excel outside of our system, take and export that outside of our system, it will no longer be encrypted. So basically with an encrypted field, all you do is when you're building the question type, you want to choose the specific question type called encrypted field. So again, if I go into this personal information on the build of the application, I have a question type called encrypted field. It can't be, you can't use a drop down or anything like that. It's just a text field or a field where they're entering text or numeric characters, and you're calling it encrypted field. And then that system knows that that's encrypted and only the global admin has access to that. The next field, the organization validation. This is something that might be, it's kind of helpful for grant users. And what this does is it's a question type that does require integration with a software program like GuideStar. So you would have to go to GuideStar, have a subscription with GuideStar. And then once you get that subscription with GuideStar, then you would also have to have our plugin to be able to communicate. So what it would do is an applicant would enter an organization, and then they would have a validate button. And when they click that validate button, it would then go out to the GuideStar program, like you have, or whatever program you're using. It would go out to that program, validate that it is a valid program, and then report back to our system on your site and say, yes, it is valid. And any fields that you've created that you want to be imported from that site to your site and within the application form, then those can be built to communicate and be populated as well with that validation. So of course you can tell, 1, it requires a subscription. 2, you have to have the CommunityForce plugin. And 3, we have to set all of that up for you because we've got to make the linkage between the CommunityForce site, your site of CommunityForce site, and with that specific program that you're communicating with. So I do have it built out here in my scholarship site. I have an example of this. And again, it's in my academic section here. So if I go out, just so you can kind of see how it kind of looks like to give you a good preview of it. Academic information. And I have organization. So when this question is built, and again, this is something that as CommunityForce would be building this for you, this linkage, we would be correctly building this for you and then creating this question. And then if you use this, then if you want to know where this question is, it's called organization validation. And then here is where we would then say, okay, what is it validated with? This would give you the list of the GuideStar or whatever program we're validating it with. And then that's where it knows, okay, this is where the linkage, it needs to be communicating with that specific program to get the data. And then when the applicant is completing it, all they see is they enter the information. In this section here, it's going to look like something similar like this. Applying school. So here we're using applying school. So they would put in a name here and then hit the validate button. And then once they hit the validate button, it would go out and look and then update any information, and then you can have it actually connect where it's populating fields as well. But that's how that validation works. So just so that you know, that is something that's out there if that's something you think you might want to use. And then the last one before we take our Q&A break here, sorry, is the payment. So the question type payment is another question type that requires third-party integration. So you do have to have a software to collect payments, and then our system will communicate with that software. And what happens is the applicant, so let's say you have a $40 fee required for your application form. So they would get to this question, and this is where you would collect that payment. They would click the payment, it would take them out to your third-party payment software, collect the payment. Then once the payment has been paid, it would return them back to your site, show that it's paid, and allow them to continue. And then you also will see that the payment's been paid and what's the date that it was paid. So to set that up, again, it requires intervention by CommunityForce because we have to make all the background connection. But just so you know, all of the parameters that need to be set up for it is, first of all, under the administration site setting, there's a site setting that has to activate all this. And then that site setting is what makes the columns appear in your managed application report, and it makes the ability to collect the payment and then show you that that payment's been paid. So under the administration site settings, there's a site setting, and it is enable application payment. And it's just a matter of turning that to yes. And then of course, CommunityForce doing all the background programming that needs to happen to make it work. And so then once that yes is there, then when you go home, then you create your application form. And then within that application form, you have some settings. Under application settings, under general information. Under general information is where you're going to put how much you're collecting. So here, application form cost is $40. So here I'm saying I have a cost to my application and it's $40. So that's where I tell the system this is how much it costs, so that when it goes to collect the payment, it knows how much to collect. So it's going to look at this and say this is where the monetary amount is. So if you are using this and you're like, why is it still showing $40 and I now charge $50? It's probably because in your application under general information, it's still showing 40. So that has to be triggered. Then after that, you have the question type that's built in your application form. And in this one, I've got it at the end here in the authorization and release section. Here I have my question. There's a $40 fee associated with this application, and then it's billed as the payment question type. So here's the payment type. And then of course in the background, we've made the linkage to your payment gateway. And then when the applicant's completing it, they're going to see in that section where that question was built, a button, make payment. When they click that make payment, that's where it's going to go out to your third-party site. They're going to make their payment on the third-party site. Then when they come back here, it'll show paid. You'll be able to see under the manage applications section, you're going to have a column that says is paid and the payment date right there. So you'll know when they've paid it and how much and whether or not they've paid that fee. So that's the payment question type. So you can see that if you do have a fee associated with your applications, we do have the ability to collect those payments for you. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Maureen for a quick Q&A. It's all yours, Maureen.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yeah, we do have a few questions. This is related to the file type of question. The question is, can we allow applicants to upload videos in the system? Unfortunately, no. We have gone over this in the past. We have had some requirements from our clients, and unfortunately, the system is going to get really heavy if we allow the videos to be uploaded. So the best way, I'm sure Christine is going to cover this in the next portion of the system of the webinar, but no, videos cannot be uploaded. What we rather suggest is you allow your applicants to upload these videos into maybe a folder or YouTube or any such platforms, video platforms, uh, and then add the link into the system. That way you will have the video links. Another question is the file types that are larger than 10. How do I allow my applicants to upload files that are larger than 10 MB? Of course, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. Is number one, create multiple questions in the system and give instructions to your applicants to split that document into maybe one or two, depending upon the size of the file. If they have trouble doing that, the other option is for you to tell them to compress the file and then upload it. So firstly, divide the question into 1, 2, or 3 questions, upload questions, give them instructions to split the file into 2 or 3 different parts and upload it separately. Or else then you can ask the applicant to compress the file. If your applicants are still facing an issue, because we understand some of your applicants might not be that technically up to date, reach out to us on support. One of our client support specialists will take care of it for you, and we'll help you and the applicant get that file uploaded. Okay. Okay, this question is, the system is not allowing some of the files to be uploaded. So here it depends on the setup of the question. What you need to understand is, or get the information from your applicant, is the error that or the prompt that the applicant is seeing when they're uploading the file. Is it in the file formats that you've added? Have you given image files and the applicant is trying, have you given the PDF file but the applicant is trying to upload an image file? Well, then the error could be given to the applicant and they will not be allowed to upload the file. So cross-check the question, cross-check what files you're allowing, and if they're still facing an issue with the file that is PDF, but they're still uploading the PDF file, and if still the error keeps popping up, reach out to us on support, and one of our support team specialists will help you with the resolution. Maybe the file could be corrupted or it could be encrypted. Who knows, right? So we'll need to have a look at the file itself to give you a solution on that. Can the date difference be shown in years? No, unfortunately, no. The date difference can either be shown in days or months only. We'll take that into consideration and we'll take it to our development team, and hopefully we'll add it to our future upgrades. And this is the last one. Can I add STEM categories to the dependent dropdown? Yes, absolutely, you could do that. That's an example for scholarships, of course, if you have some of the categories or disciplines under STEM. And if you have trouble setting that up under dependent dropdown, reach out to us, write an email to us, clientsuccess@communityforce.com. We'll help you with the setup. Okay, and we'll get that ball rolling. So those are my the questions that I've answered. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And nice job on those questions as well. So let's go ahead and move forward. So like I said, the second half, I'm going to be using the grant site to show some of the functionality with these question types, and that's mainly because a lot of these are used by our grant users. So the first one I want to talk about, of course, is the question type called application link. So what is an application link? Well, with the application link question, you have two applications. You have a starter application where the applicant goes in, completes it, and then maybe based on that application, you determine that they can move forward to another application. So maybe it's just like an eligibility application. They go in, fill it out, you look at it, determine their eligibility, and then if you determine they're eligible, then you have another section you build within that And within that section, you build a question type called application link. And then what that does is says, okay, you're eligible. That section, usually you set on a status so that when you put them to that status, they get that section. They can go in, they can click the application link. Once they click that link, it automatically directs them to the application that you want them to complete. They complete that application and move forward with the process. So with their grant users, it's usually like a letter of intent. You approve them in the letter of intent, and then they can go ahead with the program and file for the specific grant that you're offering. So you do the letter of intent, tell them they're eligible, they go in, click the link, that directs them to the grant application to where they can actually apply for the granting fund. So how does that get set up? Again, like I said, you have two applications. So in my example here, I have my letter of intent application, and then I actually have the actual grant application that they're going to be pushed to. You'll notice one of them is published and one of them is not published. It's a private application, so I'm only allowing certain individuals to have access to that application based on what I've determined their eligibility in the first application. So I have my eligibility application. And so when I build that eligibility application, I have a section within it under my application settings that when I built that section, so here, approved to submit full proposal. So I'm having them complete all of their agency information. Then if I determine they're eligible, their agency's eligible, then I can direct them to the actual grant application to begin that application process. So this section here, approved to submit full proposal, I don't want all of my applicants that are applying to my first application to get that. I only want it to be ones that have actually been approved by me. So what I do is I drive this by my status. So I actually say that when I put them as a status of selected for an award, even though they're not getting an award, this is the status that moves them where this section would appear. If this is on this application, this is the end of the line for this specific application, so I'm approving them. So I have this, as soon as I put them at this status, they're going to have this section appear. Then within this section, I built that application link question, approved to submit full proposal. So then I'm going to put them to that status. As soon as they get that status, they're going to get this section. I'll do a little preview for you. And they're going to see a click here, and that's the application link question. So it says, please select this link to be directed to the full proposal application. So when I built this question, I selected the question type application link. And then when I selected that question type, it had these two fields appear. This one is where I say, okay, when they click that button, what application do they go to? So I select the name. Then over here, I say, okay, when they click that button, they're going to go to the 2025 Community Investment Grant. What do I want to happen? Do I just want them to get a link that they can click on and apply? Do I want them to get that link that takes them to where they have an apply button and then they click the apply? Or do I want the system to automatically, they click that button, it's going to automatically start the application for them. And any data I had in this application, when I built this application, all of those sections, I want those sections are also going to be in my other application. I want it to import all of that data so they don't have to enter it again. And I want them to already have the application started for them, apply and import. So it's going to apply for them and it's going to import the data. The apply is just going to start the application for them. The link is just going to give them a link. But if I want all of this data that I built in this application, so like here, I've got my application settings, and then you can see I've got their agency contact, their profile. I want all of these. I don't want them to have to enter it again. So within my second application, I've created a clone of this one and then added my additional sections in my second application so that when they get to that second application, all of the data will import because I've included the same sections, the XML language, all of that matches. And so then I built my second application, you can see here, which is this one, and included all of those sections so that that import can happen. So here it is, and now I have all these additional sections for the applicant to complete once they get to that new one. It's going to be started. These sections are going to be done and populated, and so all they have to do is finish with the rest of the information that I want to collect. So that's how that works. So when the applicant here, my manage applications, I have my applicant that's applied, and then I want my applicant. I got to get to the right application form here. I start with my letter of intent, and I have this applicant, and they now say selected for an award. So now I can send them, I can just kind of click here, send them a quick message, say, hey, you've been approved. Go ahead and go back into this application form and click the link to be directed to the new application. So then as the applicant, when they're completing it, if I log out here and log in, whoops, I got to log in as the applicant, I'm sorry. Log in as the applicant. And go to my applications, because remember, they're just going in, they don't have that new one yet. I'm just told them go into the original applications. They're going to go into that original application. They're going to select it. They're going to come here to this approved to submit full proposal. They're going to hit the click here. And then they can go out. And now you're going to see now, look here, they now have this second application in pending submission. They can click on it. And you'll see those sections that I had populated because I had the import and apply. And so now they have the remaining sections that are needed for them to complete, like my program outcomes and signature and so forth. So that's how the application link question works. Now the next question type that we want to talk about is a question type called dropdown. So what does this do? Well, this is nice if you have a bunch of documents. So maybe you have several documents you want to give to your applicants, and you want those applicants to complete those documents. So how can you provide those? You could put them in a message and upload just one, and then you have to do all these message questions with uploads. But we also have a question type called a drop down, where you can give those documents to the CommunityForce team. We can create URLs for all of those. Then you create one question type called this question type dropdown, and it'll give them a whole list of files that they can select, and then you can have a separate question for them to upload, of course. So they can select it and then complete it and then upload it to the site. But you don't have to give like separate questions for every single one and then separate questions for all the uploads. You just, for the actual providing of the documents, then you can just give them a listing of files that they can click on, download, then they can click another one, download, click another one, download. And then of course for the uploads, you would have to have separate questions for them to upload the documents back into the site. But that's what this drop down does. So if I go back to my site here and I log back in as an admin, you can kind of see we don't have kind of the gist of how it's built. So if I go in here to I think it's in this application, under application settings, under my agency profile, I have this drop down with file downloads. And so what it would be is, here's the question. And like I said, this would be something that CommunityForce, you'd have to provide the documents, because each file gets a URL tied to it. And then that URL is what gets put into the values here. So here's the question type that was chosen. And then over here are values where those documents get put. So this is where we would put the name of the document, and then over here the value, and then over here would be a URL that directs them to that specific document. And that all comes from CommunityForce. We build all that, we build out everything. We have a place to store those documents that create the URLs, and then all of those would be here in the value of those specific documents. So if you need to remove one, then you can just come here and remove those as needed by clicking the little X here from time to time, and then hit cancel. Or you'd hit save to go ahead and save those documents once those URLs are built. Okay, so that's how that is. And then of course for the applicant, what they're going to see is when they're completing it, anything that's in those values as they're completing the question, they're going to come to that specific section, and they're going to see here, and then they're going to click this drop down, and then they would see all the documents that you have available there. They would select it, and then you'll notice as they select it, they'll see it down here, and they do one at a time. They would select it, then they would click that, and then that would take them to the document, and then they could get that document and save it to their local computer. So that's the drop down file. Now the next question is the data table and repeater. So the reason we kind of have these grouped together are because they are built the same way. It's just when you're creating the question, whether you want it to be a data table or do you want it to be a repeater. So what's the difference? So as it says here, the purpose of the data table and the repeater question type allows the applicant to provide their information in either a grid table format. So it would be a grid table where you would have columns for each question. Or the repeater allows them to answer a question and then it create multiple rows of those specific question types. So like a repeater question, an example would be if you're a grant user, maybe you want to know, do you have other forms of funding? So when they have other forms of funding, you want to know who's the provider. So they may have multiple ones. You don't want to have to create multiple questions. You just want to create one question, make it a repeater, and it gives them those fields multiple times every time they click an add button. So they click add, and it gives them another row to enter data. Click add, they get another row to enter the same data. Add, enter another row. In the past, we used to have to build questions for every single one of these. We'd have to do fund 1, amount 1, fund 2, amount 2. We'd have 4 question types when we wanted. Now you only have to build it once, build the repeater, put the repeater where you want it to be in the application process, and then they have an add button that they can use to add that. The data table is the same concept, except each question, instead of having a separate, each group of questions, it's now going to be entered into a data table with each question having columns going across the page. So I'm going to show you both of those here and how those function. So we're going to build them out so you can see how to build it, because there is a little specific way to build these. Now, one thing that's important to note, that when you use repeater question type and data table question type, you can only do one per section, because you can only have a data table in a section, and if you need another one, you have to do another section to put it in. It will cause some issues if you try to put them within the same section. So I go back out here to application settings here, and I go, so the first step is you need to create those the grouping of questions. And so you're going to create a separate section to put that grouping of questions in. So here I have my funding information repeater. If you're a scholarship user, then how this would be a benefit, think of your activities. You need the activity, when the time frame that they did the activity, or maybe awards. You need to know the award, what type of award, when did they receive their award, maybe with an activity, who was their director, that sort of thing. So what you do here is you build a section, and I just named it repeater section. It's not a special section. In this section, this is where I'm building my questions. And I make this a staff section because they won't see, it's a hidden section that the applicant doesn't see, but this is where I'm telling the system the grouping of questions I want. So my grouping is, for this scenario, this is a grant site. So I want to know what's the source of the funding. So they're going to enter the name of the agency. It's a text field. And then the amount of the funding. So this is, I'm just building out a basic section, and I'm saying what's the grouping of questions. I would just do a question for each item that I want to collect. Then with the repeater question, this is what we're going to demonstrate first. So that's my section. I'm going to make this a repeater. In the area where I want them to actually, since this is a staff section, they're not seeing it, in the section that I want them to actually complete it, I build a question type called repeater. So here's my question. Please enter your funding source. Do you have other sources of funding? Please enter them. This is where I'm building my repeater. So when I build the question, this is the question that's going to go look at that section that I just built, and it's going to build a question grouping based off of that section that I just built. So within this section, I'm saying build a repeater. When I build the repeater, I'm choosing repeater. Look at what's the section that has the questions that I'm using to build the repeater. So I'm saying funding information repeater. That's that one we just looked at. That was the one that had the 2 questions in it. And then here, do I show an add button? So do I want them to have a button that says add? And I say yes. What do I want that button to say? Click to save and add another. Do I want them to be able to delete if they entered something in error? Do I want them to be able to enter that delete on that whole line of text? And so I say yes, and then I can actually put what I want that text to be as well. So I'm building this one question that's called a repeater, telling the system that this repeater needs to look at this section and give them that grouping of questions. So then when the applicant is completing it, they're going to see something like this. Do you have other forms of funding? Please enter your funding source, 200. They have a delete, since I said that I could have a delete button. Click to save and add another. They click that. And now that field opens up. What's the funding? Click to save and add another. If they don't have another one, then they just need to hit save and return. And then it just keeps giving them that grouping. They can do another, do another, do another, and do another. So that's the repeater question type. Now, remember I said there's also a data table. How does that work? So if I go back to the application settings, and in my scenario here, I did the same. I built a section, again, a separate section. You don't want to build them in the same. It has to be a separate section because this is a different question type now. This is going to be my data table. I want this to be in a data table when they're viewing it from their site. So here's all my questions. This is a program outcome repeater. What's the objective, the activities, the timeline? All of these questions are going to be grouped as one line of entry. These are all the questions I want them to answer, and then I'm going to have a data table, and each question is going to have a separate column, like in an Excel spreadsheet, and then it's going to have the reply. Then they're going to hit add another, and then it'll have another one, a whole line of entries. So these are all the questions. I tell the system what's the questions that are going to be repeated. This is them. You can see I just build them like a regular section. I made it a staff section because the applicants aren't going to see this because it's a repeater. Then I go to the actual section. I want them to enter the repeater grouping. So under my program outcomes, I've created a question called data table. Here's that question. So the only difference is just like that repeater question we built in that other section, this one is we're choosing the question type. Instead of choosing the question type repeater, I'm choosing the question type data table. And then when I choose that, what's the section that has the grouping of repeater questions? The program outcomes repeater. And then here is where I do again with my buttons here, my edit, my deletes, my save and add another, my cancel entry. And then also with the data table, where do I want it to be on the page? Do I want it to be at the top of the page? Do I want it to be at the bottom of the page? I'm saying put it at the top of my view. So then when the applicant is completing this, they come to this section. Program outcomes. And now here's that repeater. Remember I said it's one for each question. This is the top of that area, so that's why the data table is showing the top of this section here. I can edit it. So if they hit edit, it'll open up this specific line of text. They can delete it and it'll open it up. And then here is where they can start entering everything else. Test 2. I'm just going to plug in something real quick here. It's not going to make sense, I know, but I'm just doing this. Timeline. Save and add another objective or goal. And so every time they enter one, it'll start putting it at the top here, and then you can see it. So that's how the data table works. So that's the repeater and data table. And then the next one I want to show you is this question URL. So Maureen answered a question earlier in regards to videos, how you cannot upload videos. But what you can do is you can have, so maybe they have, an applicant has a video and it's in YouTube and they have a URL. You can actually do a question type called question type URL where the applicant can give you the URL of the location of that video. And then you can go out from that URL, you can click on the URL, go out and see that specific video. Or maybe you want to collect a website, a URL of their website, then you can use the question type URL. So we just look at this real quick, like here, the build of it. So if I go back in here to application settings, and it's just a matter of creating a question type like you would any question type. And then when you build that question, here's my website. It's called question type URL. I want to know what their website is. And so when I choose my question types, I just say URL. And then when they get to that question, they have to enter a URL. So this one is just their website. What's this organization's website? I want to know what the URL is. It may be for scholarships. If you want them to upload a video, you can say, please provide the URL of the video location. And then they enter, when they get to that question, they can only enter a URL address and web address into that specific field. That's all it will accept. Okay, so the next one then is predominantly just for our grant users, but what it does is allows for an applicant, whoops, I guess I closed out the complete site here. Let's go back in to my grant site. And when you're looking at applicants, so you could have scenarios where you want an applicant to apply multiple times. So with grant users, they're applying, they have a specific program, they're coming to you and wanting funding for that program. But you may allow them to have multiple programs that they're applying for funding. So maybe they have multiple departments. You want them to be able to have multiple applications. It's the same person going and applying for those applications. But you need to be able to determine, okay, they have 10 applications. What's the program? So when you're looking at their applications listing, your manage applications listing, any report listing in the site, you're seeing the organization name. But what program name does is it allows you to have one field within the whole application where they can actually enter the program name. And then when you're looking at this application forms, like here I have 4-H Club, I can see, okay, this is their STEM project, this is their childhood cancer program. I can see the two different programs and know, okay, which funding is for which, and I can quickly access what I need to access. So this program name column has to be activated in the administration site settings. I mean, it's not a site setting. I apologize for that. What it does is you do have to have CommunityForce turn it on. Then once they turn it on, then that program name question type is available. And here under the questions here, when you build the question, it'll be available here, home. Under application settings, under my program overview, I have my question that's available, program name. And then once we turn it on, then that question will be available. You select program name, it's a text field. The applicant sees it, they complete it. And then when they complete it, it will populate this column. This column will be present, program name. They also, on their side, the applicant side, they'll see their organization. They'll also see program name on their end as well. So that's what that does. It helps you identify the program. Now, this is something if you're a scholarship user and you think, "Ooh, I'd like to use that," I might have that scenario where that might possibly work. I might need something like that. Maybe they're applying for research grants or something like that, and you want to be able to have a program name, and it's an applicant applying, but they have multiple research grants they're applying for, then you can use that program name in that scenario since it's a scholarship program. Now I'm going to jump to the scholarship site because the next one is kind of similar to the program name. It's something that we can turn on for you. CommunityForce can turn it on. And what it does is that it's a question type that allows you to capture the tuition date. So a lot of times when an applicant gets a scholarship, you need to know what's the date that the tuition is due. So we actually have a question type for that. And what's nice with that question type is it does kind of like that program name. That question type will appear when you are looking at the applicant report here, this manage applications. If I go all the way over to the right, I have a field column tuition due date. And the reason I have that is because I've included this question in the build of my application form. So when I build my application, what I did is in my scholarship claim form here, I said, one, they're accepting their scholarship, but what's the date that the tuition is due? So when I created this question, I have a question type, tuition due date. I selected that specific question. And then when the applicant completes it, then what it will do is populate the field here so I can quickly see. I don't have to go into their application to see when their tuition's due. I can actually come right here and say, okay, it's due September 1st. I need to be going in and getting that check cut for that specific applicant because their tuition is coming up due. So that's one question type that you're allowed that can be a tuition due date question. And then the final question type I want to talk about is available on any site, of course. It's for capturing the signature. And what it does is it allows them to either upload a picture image of a signature, or they can actually have a little box that opens up where they can sign their actual signature for you to capture. Instead of just doing that electronic signature, this is called physical signature, where you actually get a physical signature from the applicants. So if I go back to the site, just so you can kind of see here, So you would build that where you want the signature to be housed in the section. So here I have my section, let's see here, authorization and release. And instead of using electronic signature, I use physical signature. So there's my signature question. I've chosen physical signature instead of electronic signature. And then what's the type of file I'm going to allow? I said I'm going to allow an image. Click OK. And so that's telling it I want an image, so that can be a physical upload of an image, or where they get the box, it's going to allow that image as well, is what that does. So now I'm going to go over here to the application. And then what the applicant sees is when they're completing the application, if I go here, under this section here, so here it says upload your official signature. She can browse and upload a document or hit the signature pad. And when that signature pad opens up, then they come here and then they can just enter the information. They can sign it. Hit save. And then when you're looking at the application, I'm not sure I might have needed to hit save and return there. We'll see in a minute. In the preview, you'll be able to see what they've uploaded or the actual signature that they've entered as soon as this loads. And there you go. You can see there's the official signature there. So that is it on all the question types that we wanted to discuss today. So I'll turn it over to you, Maureen, and you can close out with the final Q&A.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, we do have a few questions. One of the questions, this is related to the application link. My applicants are unable to get access to the final or the full application. That is the second phase of the application. Well, there are a couple of things that you need to check. Number one, check for the status at which you are allowing your applicants to get access to this link. So check the section status, check for the applicant status. Both of them match, then definitely the applicants should have access to the link. Yet, even after doing that, you're still, your applicants are saying that, no, I do not get access, I'm unable to click on the link. Then check for the section deadline date. If the deadline date has passed, your applicants might still not get access to the final or the full application or the second phase of the application. If neither of these work, reach out to our support team. There could be something happening with the link itself, with the linkage. So our team will, look for the linkage, if the link is correctly set up or not, and then we'll provide you a solution. And then the second one, the next question I have is related to the drop down with the file download. The question is, where are the documents stored? The ones that you provide to us, where are these documents stored? Because we are giving you the link, right, to create these questions. Where are these documents stored? Well, the documents are stored in your database that is associated with your website, that CommunityForce website. So these are all secure. They are stored in our CommunityForce servers. So don't worry about the privacy issues or security concerns. They're all very secure. Okay. And I have another question. We cloned our application for the 2026 cycle, but the data table, the repeater question did not come through. Do I have to create that once again? Well, yes, there is a limitation here. The data table and repeater questions do not come through when you're cloning or rolling over the application. Reach out to us and we'll help you with the setup of that data table or repeater questions. So you have to remember, when you're cloning your application that has data tables or repeaters, they will not come through. Okay. And this is the last one. I'm going to stop at this then. Can I use the data table or repeater questions to capture financial aid for a scholarship program? Yes, absolutely. Like Christine has mentioned, for source of funding on grant side, you can use the same on the financial aid. So there are various aids that the applicants can get, grants, scholarships, loans, work study programs, or tuitions or waivers. You can definitely add those on the data table questions or repeaters, either of those. Okay. So that's from my side, Christine. Thank you so much, everyone. Back to you, Christine.
And thank you. Thank you, Maureen, for covering those questions. I appreciate that. So that does wrap up our session for today. So again, we thank everyone for attending, and always be sure to get a copy of the handout that was available, because that does give you the links where you can have quick access to those specific question types that will take you to our help desk or help guides, and they give you more details on how to build those out, because of course, in an hour and a half there's a lot to discuss, and so that'll give you a little bit more detail on how to do those specific question types. So if anything that we discussed today, if it's something that you think you may be able to use with your process, then please feel free. As always, we're always here for you. Please feel free to reach out to Zendesk and ask for a client support specialist to reach out to you and kind of go over your process and kind of see if this is a functionality that may be a benefit to you, maybe something you might incorporate to make it easier for your applicants to complete your application forms, as well as you to be able to capture data, so it's not so tedious of a task for either of you. So again, we thank everyone for attending, and we'll probably be having our next session in September, and we're trying to get it so that it falls after the holiday, and I think probably the 9th will probably be our next one. So please keep on the lookout for an invite for that, and I hope everyone has a good weekend and rest of your week, and take care, everyone. See you later. Bye.